Everybody knows that selling courses online is the best business model to get paid. But all of this information is already for free on YouTube. So in the last 4 years, I had my own startup and I watched so much of this content, and I'm trying to give this condensed in one video to you right now. So in the next few minutes, you're basically getting around 100 years, if that's possible, of content. My name is Chris. Thanks for tuning in. The aim of this video is basically to get you started so you have an overview of the topics that you will have to deal with. And in total, I structured the video in 3 blocks. The first block being the personal block, where we talk about the approach, your characteristic that you bring, and something that is normally never talked about, and that is, what is even money? In the second block, I summarized a lot of the videos from Harvard University, which I recommend you to watch as well. But there we will talk about the value proposition, the business model, and all about the theory. Then in the final block, block 3, we're going to talk about practice. So what you actually do in real life, branding, going to market, selling, team, and funding. And also a few specials here and there. And now as a quick spoiler, if you want to jump ahead, do so. But the first block will give you the foundation, the personal side. The second block will then show you the right way, but at the end you will find out what's the most important. So let's get going. Now the approach you will always need for starting a business is that you realize from the get-go that it is a long journey, or at least it can be a long journey. The goal should always be to make this journey as fun as possible. So I really want to manage your expectations, because I think building a business and being an entrepreneur has been a little bit overly glorified on social media in the last few years, which is good because I want you to get going as well. But it is tough. It is simple, but not easy. So you should really find a purpose for yourself before you actually go into that journey. And to find the purpose, you can do that by looking at some things you like. Or sometimes it's even easier by looking at things you don't like. For example, I don't like having a job that forces me to do things I don't like to do. That means I do not like to be dependent. Now, for example, what could be my purpose or my value that I would strive for is that I inverse this and say, okay, for me, it's important to have freedom. And if you now think about all the things you do not like to do, it's sometimes easier to inverse those and then deduct the purpose out of them. It's very important to find the purpose, because then you can structure goals and you can make it clear where you want to go. It's your journey, so make sure it's perfect for you. Your future is not optional, so it's important to understand that it doesn't matter what you go for. You create it, and you should have the goals to basically bring it to that direction, but you should also be aware of the consequences that those goals have. If you have a very ambitious goal, you will then have to make some sacrifices to go there. It's neither good nor bad, but you have to understand the consequences. If you want to be in the moment and relax and do nothing, it's neither good nor bad, you just have some different consequences. So be aware of that and understand that if you don't sacrifice for what you want will become the sacrifice. So if you now basically try to find out what you don't like and try to inverse it to find your purpose, you need motivation to start, but at some time this motivation will fade away and you will need discipline to get to the goal. Because discipline brings you up at morning, and it should be fairly easy to instill discipline into your life if you know that what you are doing is good for you. There's an intrinsic benefit that gets you going. And what also helps you is to focus, because focus not only allows you to tell you what you should do, but also all of those things that you shouldn't do. Now, one thing which is often forgotten is what is even money, because some people just chase values or goals and say, okay, my goal is to be a millionaire or to have $5 million. Dollars or euros or whatever. But the issue is that money itself, you need to understand that money as a concept is just a store of value. So money itself, if you pull out a $60 bill, it is worthless because nobody is going to accept it. Money is a store of value, and people have trust in this store of value. So what you need to understand is that if you want to get affluent or to get wealthy, you always need to provide value. And the thing about value is that it has an individual perspective to it, which depends on supply and demand and also scarcity and other factors. But what's crucial is that you need to shift your focus from money, from getting money, to providing value. Because if you provide value, you will get the store of value from somebody as an exchange, which is money. So think about this when you start your business and when you build your personal foundation. And that's it. We were basically now talking about business being a long journey, or not at least a long journey, but a journey nevertheless. You should make it more enjoyable because it's your journey and your future is not optional, so create your future. You should know your purpose and then deduct your goal, and you can do that oftentimes by inversing what you want. You will need motivation to start and then discipline to continue, but discipline should be quite easy to foster if you know that what you're doing is actually what you want. So focus on whatever you need to do to get there. You can then break down the goals for each day or for each period of time, and then focus on the things that bring you further, but also focus allows you to cut out those things you don't need. Now in block 2 we were going to talk about a lot of stuff from Harvard University because they have a lot of content. Be sure to check it out, I linked it down in the description below. But it basically is a summary of a lot of high-level courses from a very good university. Now we already realized that money as a store of value forces us to provide value for somebody. And since value is depending on the perception of the other person or of the individual, the client or the potential client, the opinion of this person is key. So we should always target something which brings value to this other person. And we know how we can bring value is if we solve a problem or target a need. And that's exactly what a company does. A company is always trying to focus on one specific thing. There's no company which is doing everything. You have some companies like BMW, they produce very good cars, and others specialize in other things. But to understand what your company will do, there's something which is called the value proposition. This is a summary of what you as a company are trying to achieve to make it clear for yourself, for investors, and for your actions, what you do and where you propose your value to a client. Now let me quickly show it to you. An example of a value prop statement from the Harvard University was for target group with X problem, that is you, who are dissatisfied with the current unworkable and underserved alternative, our product is a category that provides gain and that overcomes switching costs, unlike the alternative. Now you might think, okay, that sounds kind of interesting, but how do I actually use this in a practical case? Now we will break it down, but if we, for example, are a pizza shop, it would look the following way. For truckers on highway something who sleep away from home, who have no way to eat good food while driving, our product is a pizza that provides a nutritious meal filled with love and makes the truckers less homesick, unlike eating alone in their cabin. Now, if we structure it like this, it's instantly clear who are we targeting, the truckers, where they are on the highway, XYZ, whatever, and what we provide, why we provide it, and why it's better than an alternative. So if you actually think about this sentence alone, you solve a huge issue for most of the businesses. My startup that I founded, which we'll talk later about, we were focusing on things that didn't matter. So you should always provide value and think about why this value matters to a client. Now to break this down, let's start with the target market. The target market is just a representation of who you want to target. Surprise. And the usual business models are B2B, which means business to business, B2C, which is business to consumer, and then there are some more like direct to consumer brands. But the core thing when choosing a target market is to find out if they have the 4 key attributes which were described by Hormozi. And those 4 attributes are if the target market has a massive pain, purchasing power, is easy to target, and growing. Because if you have the opportunity to choose between a good product and a very hungry market, it is always best to choose a market that is hungry. The best example that is often given is if you have a hot dog stand randomly somewhere with mediocre hot dogs, so the location is the product is meh, but if you have a starving crowd, it doesn't matter what you produce because the target market is hungry and they want your hot dogs. Now, if you found your target market, it is important to find a problem that you can solve. And sometimes this problem finds you, but if you go at the theoretical route, it is important to look through the eyes of the users or of the potential clients to find out what the problem is. And the easiest way to do so is to ask them. Ask them, what is your problem? What is your issue? And if you cannot ask them directly, people love to overshare. So you can ask them a question or read a feedback online, on Amazon, on Reddit, whatever, and realize what is missing, what wasn't good, and then you have a problem that you can fix. Now, it's very important to define this problem. And in the Harvard classes, there were a lot of frameworks given. The first one is that your problem should have the 4 U's. They stand for unworkable, unavoidable, urgent, and underserved. It is important that they have those 4 U's to show that this problem is an actual problem. If you have an avoidable problem, then it's not really a problem. It is always important that you make the differentiation between a painkiller, so you solve a real problem, a real pain, a must-have, or a vitamin. A vitamin is something that is a nice to have, that is beneficial, but it's not really that important. It's a nice to have. So it's always important to make the differentiation or to find the difference between those 2 problems. The second framework is the black and white framework, where you can then define where your problem actually lies. BLAC stands for blatant, latent, aspirational, and critical. And you can put it into a matrix that then shows you where your problem would be. And now you have the overlap again. The latent aspirationals are the nice-to-haves, and the blatant criticals are the must-haves. Blatant means that you realize that there is a problem, and critical means that it's critical. So if it's latent and aspirational, you don't really know that there is a problem and it might be coming in the future. Now, you should always try to address the white space, the blatant critical part in the market, that is an open area of opportunity that you can capture uniquely well. Now, if you have the problem or multiple problems, which is even better, you now should start to find a solution. And finding a solution is difficult if you don't have the proper framework. But there's a YouTuber called Tamer Shaheen, or CEO Entrepreneur on YouTube. Check out his video down below as well. And he was talking about solution neutral functions, which is a genius way to approach this problem. Now, what is a solution neutral function? That sounds like a fancy word, you might say. And it is basically the transformation you get when you look at the problem, forget the solution and how you solve this problem, and then think about the benefits that happen when you solve the problem. For example, problem, I have a dirty garden. And now my benefit is if I clean the dirty garden, I maybe feel better. I have a better standing in my neighborhood. Whatever, I don't have a garden, as you can see. But you can now then think about how you achieve those 2 points. How do you get from A to B? How do you achieve this transformation? So for example, for a garden, you could offer a service which cleans the garden because they maybe don't have the time. You could also, if they don't know how to clean the garden, offer a course which tells them how to clean the garden. Or you can basically sell them a product which allows them to clean the garden. So you always have the same problem and you always have the same endpoint, which is a clean garden. But the way how to get there is different. So list all of those solution neutral functions out, how you can achieve this, and then we come to the next point, which is the difficulty value matrix. The difficulty value matrix allows you to find out if you should prioritize one solution or one approach over the other. Think about a matrix. Boom. With difficulty and value. So you always have low difficulty to high difficulty and low value to high value, which would end up with 4 quadrants. Now each of those quadrants has a different pairing. For example, you have the ideal place to go for, which is low difficulty and high value. Of course, because you always want to pick the thing where you have the best return on investment. So you put in a little, but you get out a lot. That's what you aim for. But you will not be the first one to get into this segment. So this one will be the first to be saturated. Then you have the low difficulty and low value quadrant, which is, as you see already, low value. So you solve this and you will not get so much engagement as you would like. Those, for example, would be perfect for upsells if you have your core product and then offer this as well as a vitamin, a nice to have. But this being your core product will be difficult to sell. So try to make it an upsell. Now you have the high difficulty and high value. Those are custom solutions, for example, and after some time the market entry will be there because everything else will be saturated. Those can be then easy for big companies to get into, but at the beginning, since the difficulty is high, will be tough for you as an entrepreneur. Now the final quadrant is the high difficulty, low value. And as you already guessed, common sense, you should avoid this because you put in a lot of effort, but you get little returns. So put all of those solutions that you have on this matrix and try to find out where your solution is. Because it's important to think about where you spend your time. Your time is the most important resource that you have right now. So use it carefully. Don't invest something of your time into something which is very difficult but has no reward. I mean, at the end of the day, you either earn or you learn, so it's going to be nice and a journey. But if you spend the time and you learn something, it's even better if you then get something back as well. And then when you basically found out where you put those solutions on this matrix, think about scalability. You should aim for things where you have scalability somewhere inside. So the product itself doesn't have to be scalable because the most valuable inventions are platform solutions, like for example, Amazon, Shopify, and Stripe or YouTube. Those companies are platforms. But below those, everything else is scaling. It is scaling around this environment of the platform. In the real world, those would be, for example, a casino or a stock exchange. Everybody is going to the platform and the house always wins. So try to be a platform or try to be scalable because that's what you're trying to aim for. And now if you thought about all of those options, you have to validate your solution because it's important to ask yourself, can you do it? And can you do it often? So the feasibility and the viability. Because if you now think, okay, I have this opportunity to, I don't know, build a colony on Mars, maybe Elon Musk can do it in a few years, but you have to be honest with yourself because right now, I doubt that, for me at least, I would never able be to do it. So be realistic and try to structure it in a way that makes sense. And then think about if you are in debt. Now, I don't mean personal debt, I mean the framework from Harvard again. And that stands for dependencies, external factors, backlash, and timing. Now, dependencies mean if you are dependent on anybody in the supply chain, maybe you're dependent on the government or on one of the contractors. The external factors are the external factors. And backlash is, for example, if you're right now going in the AI space. If you're going to in the AI space, it's a controversial topic because a lot of people think you're going to take away a lot of jobs. So you have to be careful about this as well. But according to one TEDx talk, which I link down below as well, timing is one of the, if not the most important thing you should be caring for. Because timing is the best example of Nikola Tesla. He had so many great ideas and inventions. There were other things which happened, yes. But he was just way too soon with most of his inventions. So timing is crucial if you want to be successful. So set yourself up for success. Now you should be able to filter your solutions. You now know which are available with your solution neutral functions. And you also know which you could go for because they have the best return to input ratio. And the moment you will basically look for alternatives and look around, you would probably find some competition, which means somebody else is doing the thing you're trying to do. But fear not, this is actually a good sign, because that means the problem that you were trying to solve is actually a problem where people are willing to give money, so to the store of value, to solve this problem. So that means there is money in this market, and it's a good way to go forward. On the other hand, sometimes there will be no competition at all, and then it's inversed. You need to be careful and think about if this is actually as easy as you thought it would be, and if the problem is as important as you figured. Because there's the difference between a blue ocean and a red ocean strategy. Red ocean refers to an ocean which is full of competition, maybe even too much competition, that the ocean is red from all the fighting and all the blood. And blue ocean, on the other hand, means that there's no a little competition, and you can swim around like a good, okay, maybe not like an orca, but like a tuna. Think about competition as a good sign at the beginning, because it means that there's something good and there's demand for your solution. Now, to capture this demand, it is important to structure yourself and position yourself in the correct way. We will talk about positioning later, but a good way to begin from the get-go is to think about the offer and value equation from Alex Hormozi again, which is the dream state multiplied times the likelihood of success divided through time delay multiplied times effort and sacrifice. You should maximize everything which is above and minimize everything which is below. Now, to maximize the dream state is simply telling the customer what could be achieved. And this is quite easy, because you can most of the time make up something that is not true. It's not recommended. It is better to show a higher likelihood of success with, for example, testimonials or with a good track record. But the true mastery lies in minimizing what is below the division. So if you can structure your offer in a way that has little to no time delay, that means from purchase to getting the value, then if you keep it as short as possible, that is very, very good. And it is also very good if you can limit the effort the buyer has to put in and limit the sacrifices the buyer has to do. For example, if you have to set up a new software and it's super difficult, then the buyer will not be really happy. But if you have it easy and the setup is done within a few minutes, and the buyer doesn't have to change anything of the previous settings and maybe can integrate it, then there are no sacrifices and little effort to get to your solution, to your dream state, and it's way better and a way better structure for the customer. Now, if you have the problem and the solution that is the best for the target market, you can bring it together and think about the before and after, the gain and the pains. Are there any gains? What are those? What are the pains and what is the inertia? So the gains, for example, could be revenue increases, cost savings, you save time, people have more productivity, do you have a competitive advantage, your reputation increases. And the pains could be, for example, the awareness that they even find you as a startup is often a big problem. The engagement and the trial, buying you because you maybe have a different price structure or the packaging and the license is difficult, and the implementation and deployment is difficult. So those could be pains, and most often it is just a factor of trust. They don't know you and they don't know if that what you are trying to deliver is actually happening or if you're just a scam. Nobody wants to be scammed, so you have to be careful and think about their view and their perspective as well. Now, the inertia are oftentimes the switching costs. And since humans are people who follow patterns, you have to give them a good reason to switch, because good enough is good enough. And if the alternatives are not really that much worse and you're not that much better, don't expect them to change. They really have to have a good reason to do so. So give it to them. Show them that you actually provide your value, that the dream state is closer than they think, and that the likelihood of success is high without them having to do any efforts or do any sacrifices. So if you now bring all of those things together, we should have the value equation and the value proposition in the following way. For target customers with blatant, latent, aspirational or critical problem or needs, that is one of the 4 or multiple of the 4 U's, who are dissatisfied with the current unworkable and underserved alternative, our product is a minimum viable product that provides a compelling problem-solving capability, which is the gain, and it overcomes the switching costs, for example, the gain over pain, unlike the unworkable product alternative that exists right now. This should actually be the foundation for your product and then your company, because you need to be clear of the value that you provide. And you need some way of capturing this value, and this is the way of the business model. Now, the CEO entrepreneur, Mr. Shan, mentioned a lot of those, and I won't go into too much detail there, because at the end of the day, if you provide value, you sooner or later will have no problem of capturing this exchange of value. So it is always important to keep that in mind. But if you want to go the next step and say, okay, you're trying to get a good valuation, that means investors are thinking that your company is more attractive, you should aim for getting recurring revenue, so subscription-based monthly fixed revenues. The step above recurring revenue is to aim for a business model that allows you to scale with your clients, that makes you more successful when your clients are more successful. Salesforce, for example, is a customer relationship management tool, a CRM, which allows you to save all the data from all your potential buyers. Potential buyers are called leads. You as a company, when you have more revenue, you will need to have more people who take care of this topic. So you as Salesforce want the company to be successful. And if the company is successful, it needs to pay you more because you, for example, charge for every user that uses it. So you scale with the users and you have a business model which makes the users more valuable over time. And if you now have your business model set up, you should have a company, at least on paper. And it is simple, but you will realize it's not easy. So it is very important that you have the direction for you set up, that you know that is a journey and that you know what you should expect. But it's just as important to know this on a personal side, what we did in block 1, but also what you actually want for the company, where your company should go for. And that's where the vision, the mission, the strategy and other things come into play. And it's important to have a vision because the values that your company stands for example, doing the right thing, being customer-centric, those build the vision and it shapes where you want to go. And the mission then afterwards is at a high level of what you will realize. The strategy is oftentimes then defined to lay out goals and how you deal with problems. And now you might think, okay, why does this matter? I know this anyway. And it's true, you know it. But if you have any marketing goals, if you want to hire a new person and somebody does things for you, they won't know what you or the founding team wants. So if you define it, it's not just for you to understand it, but for others to know it as well. Because you should have everything aligned. Why is that the case? Because everybody has a small thread. And they can put their thread wherever they want to do and do something and tie a knot. But if you put all of those threads together, you get a rope and everybody can pull in the right direction and get to the goal of where the company is supposed to be. And that needs to be defined. Because after some time, you will have a lot of people around you. And the most important thing in a company are the people at the end of the day. One person can never outdo 50 as a team. So it is important to have a good culture and a way of doing things as a team, to have shared values, beliefs and guiding principles, and that you're living what you say, of executing and how you deal with problems with accountability. And at the beginning, it will always come from you. It will always come from the leadership team, because you should unify, enable those around you to work together. And you can do that by finding guiding principles. Often absence of a culture leads to unculture. People will start to create barriers. They will start to create silos. That means the departments just focus on their parts and they don't care about the greater goal. And the culture should always have the target of unifying, of empowering and flowing, so you are resulting in a better place than you have before. Now, this shouldn't be a thing that you just do like this one time and then you throw it away. It should be something that you do carefully and that you come back every now and then to redefine it and refine it, because it's growing as a culture should be. So take your time, don't rush it, and set yourself up for success. Now you should have clarity about yourself, the value that you can deliver as a company, for whom with the value proposition, and you are clear about where your company should and could go. And now the only thing to do is the work, which sounds easy, but as we mentioned, it is simple but not easy. Once a successful friend of mine told me that 3% is the idea and 97% is the work. The reason for that is that a lot of people have great ideas, but it matters how you execute it. And that is the most important part, which I also structured in the introduction, that you have to turn your ideas into reality for them to matter. Because it is so easy to have an idea, but to actually bring that idea into reality and turn your dreams into facts is where the difficulty lies. If you think about this transformation from dreaming to reality, from having a problem to solving it, the customers have the same feelings. And those feelings should be associated with you, with your brand, which brings us to branding. The brand is the feeling or the thoughts of what you as a company stand for, but it's in the brain of the client. So it builds over a long time. It could be 3 to 6 months. And it is one of the most important investments of your time that you can and must do. It is long term, but it is very, very important, not just for positioning and differentiation, but also for other things like marketing. As a practical example, there are some brands, like for example BMW, where you know what they do. They produce cars. Or Samsung, they produce actually a lot, but mostly electronic stuff. But then there are others that you don't know. For example, Tenga. We never went into the market because this was my startup, and we never made it out. And this is the major issue. Go out there and realize that the moment you're out there, with every interaction you do, with every touch point you have with the consumer, you create your brand. So start from the go and build what you want to deliver, this brand promise, upon dreams and aspirations of your clients. So really make sure to base it upon emotional facts, because they're just way more intensive than simple facts. Now, branding itself is a massive help in marketing and differentiation, but it's also important that you as a company position yourself different than competition. You will have competition, as we already talked about, and it is important to give the people who follow patterns a reason to change. And it's sometimes very difficult for them to find a reason if you don't give it to them. For example, if we look at flour, you won't really find the difference as quickly as you might think. But if you have a potential brand behind it, then it's easier for them to pick a different solution. Now, at the end of the day, you are in a market with limited money in the space. So you also have to think about how you are different from your competition. Now, this is important for yourself and for others to find a way of differentiating yourself. And to do that is to position yourself for white space. White space is, again, if we look at a graph and two axes, the choice of those axes is very important, which is low to high. You can define the barriers of entry into each of those segments and then position your competition in one of those parts. But the important thing is that you or your solution and your company excel in one of the different things. So the competition and the client knows what you stand for and why they should go to you instead of the competition. That is positioning yourself for white space. Now, when you go into the market, it is very important that you understand that the beginning is going to be the toughest part. So you always have to think about surviving, showing up and improving there. So you want to have as little investments, because you never know of how long this is going to be, rapid iteration and lots of feedback to have the best solutions for your target customer. You need to understand what is working and you need to get paid. Your first sale, and we will talk about selling, is the easiest solution. So you pick one problem, you have one solution for one target market. And this one problem and one solution is the minimum viable product. Minimum viable product is just the easiest part. Maybe you have a great vision, but chop it down and do the thing which is low difficulty and high value for this client, and then go for it. You shouldn't then target the whole target market, but the minimum viable segment. So maybe only for pizza buyers, the truckers on this highway, or on a certain section of the highway. You should aim for the customer saying, you hit my need and you made me more successful. And it is very important to get those first sales, because you need to overcome the switching costs and the inertia and the trust. So you should aim for social proof. This fear of failure, this loss of faith, this potential, needs to be overcome. So find testimonials by providing your product for free the first time and then telling them, okay, can you give me recommendations about similar customers? Or can you write me a short text, or let's make a video, and use this to go to the next ones and tell them, look, it worked. Now here's my value, here's my solution. And they will trust you more than just a random Joe from the street. No disrespect to the Joes. Now, to structure this experience in a slippery way is super important. And slippery stands for simple, low to no initial cost, installs easily, proves value quickly, plays well with others, is easy to use, the return on investment is obvious, and for why, you probably guessed it correctly, the customers can't live without it. Now, the perceived value is very important if you have this, because if the customer doesn't know you, the value is just made up. So you find testimonials, do the first project for free, and always try to listen, to learn, to lead, iterate, and if you have to pivot, change things to be on the spot of your problem to have the perfect solution for your target customer. Now, you can only manage what you measure, and you cannot improve it if you don't. So if you want to improve things, start by being Romeo or results oriented and measure execution and driven through iteration. Rome wasn't built in a day, and you will have to start measuring the important things first. And also measure and improve, but always with the customer in mind. Don't focus only on the metrics. The human factor and the experience are key. Now, usually when you are independent, that means if you do it on your own responsibility, you do it long term and on a regular basis with the intention of earning money, you will have to go legal. Now, I cannot and will not give you any legal advice, but it is very important that if you hit those 3 or 2, then you probably, depending on your jurisdictions, will have to get into the legal structures. Inform yourself which types make the most sense for you. Ask a tax advisor or a legal consultant what would make most sense for you. You can ask ChatGPT to give you some outlines about what exists in your region. And most of the times it's a difference between limited liability and unlimited liability, which means that if you do something and you mess up in an unlimited liability company, you would lose your personal belongings. I would use or lose this beautiful table there if my company makes a mistake and I need the money and I don't have it. Now, in limited liability, the personal life and the company are separated. The limited liability is very important, and often the differentiations between those two is that the limited liability company is more expensive to set up and has more running costs. As I mentioned, this is no legal advice. Check it out, and also think about trademarking if you are getting into the market. Please don't make the mistake that I did. I trademarked Tenga for 900 euros to basically protect something which doesn't exist. So think about trademarking when you're actually in the market, when you're getting traction, and when there's actually something you have to protect. So trademark, yes, but do it at the right time. Now, a little bit of theory about selling. Interested people are called leads, and those leads are going into the sales funnel. There you have different stages. Now the stages are awareness, interest, understanding, engagement, trial, and purchase. And those stages can be seen as different actors with different intentions and which you have to target in a specific way. Now each of those stages needs a different message and you need to adapt it. Because if you look, for example, buy a microwave, you already know what a microwave is. You are in the purchase section. You do not want to have an article online of you telling how a microwave works. On the other hand, if you're looking for what is a microwave, you are in the awareness stage. And if somebody shows you an ad of telling you, buy this microwave now, you will not be interested. Now, those stages don't have to be followed like this, but it is important to understand that you will need to generate lead flow. And you will have a lot of metrics to measure those, which are called KPIs, key performance indicators. A well-known one is the conversion rate. How many leads you get into and how many at the end will become buyers. Another one is the customer acquisition cost. How much does it cost you, for example, in advertisement spend, to get the aware lead to become a purchase? Now, this customer acquisition cost can be then compared to the lifetime value. So how much money do they spend on their lifetime? Now, to make it as easy, you should create flow and seamless steps. So the customer always gets pushed or pulled into the next step and it is again slippery and the customer is sliding into the purchase area. Now you can always reverse engineer it and find the total leads, because this lead funnel is very important to target revenue. You know the customer acquisition cost. So how much does it cost you to get each lead and how much does each lead bring you and how many you lose along the way. Now, if you do this correctly, let's say you have 10 leads and a conversion rate of 10%, that means you need to target 100 leads to get 10 at the end. And if you now know that each of those 10 costs you €1 and brings you 10, you will end up with €9 of profit for each. And then you can say, okay, at the end, we make €90 of revenue. So you know how much you can plan for the whole budget. Now, oftentimes at the beginning, you don't have a sales funnel set up, so you will start with personal selling. And if you remember about the value of selling, it is always depending on the other person. So you don't try to sell the solution, but you try to sell the transformation, which is then the value for the other person. You do not sell that I have a glass here, but you sell that I try to not be thirsty anymore. You try to sell the sizzle and not the steak. People rarely want data. Some people want it in certain purchases, but you always want to sell the transformation. And to understand that if they actually care for this, you need to listen. You need to understand the customer. Do your research, listen, ask them if they actually have the problem and the need. And if you then like each other, the deal will happen. There are a few steps and a few techniques you can use, but if you get it right and the customer actually needs you and you both like each other, the deal will happen. Now you might say, I don't care, I can sell to him even if he doesn't like me and then we'll never see each other again. And that is true, it works. But in my opinion, business should always be a win-win. Both parties should be happy and it is always the long term which is more interesting to me. It should be beneficial for both parties, and if you have somebody on your side who you don't like and that doesn't like you, then you won't get a partnership. Afterwards there will be no clients and maybe it might be even a pain to work with them the whole time. So you get money but you lose a lot of patience and maybe even hair. But bring in your character and think long term to build relationships which give you more than money. because relationships matter. Now, there's a lot of ways on how you actually capture leads and how you get leads, and they were described in the book of Hormozi, again, $100 million leads. You can find it down in the description. But to reach and to convert a lot of leads is then also already a topic of marketing. And in good marketing, you actually try to avoid selling or to not have to sell anymore, because you target your message so good to this target group that they go where you need them to go. So they will do the selling automatically. Now, marketing as a topic is very complex and is a huge topic by itself, so we will not cover it as much as in detail. But at the end of the day, you have a target market, a serviceable available market, and a serviceable obtainable market. And you always try to target the best part so you get the most return on your investment. But it is very important in the topic of marketing to never forget, first of all, the human experience and the importance and the value of having a good product. A good product leads to a happy customer, because the customer experience decides what will happen afterwards. Will you get a repeating customer, only a one-time customer? And having a repeating customer is way cheaper than always trying to get a new one. So having a happy customer, not just as a happy wife leads to a happy life, a happy customer does so too. Now, if you have a good product, you will have something which is called word of mouth marketing, where people actually do the marketing for you because it was so good. A few days ago, I invited a few friends for dinner and we had some juices, which I pressed from a cold juicer, and they were amazed, and now they maybe buy a cold juicer like this as well. So me being satisfied with the product made it into a marketing campaign for the company, which didn't do anything except provide a good product. Now, what has to be kept in mind is that it boils down to the expectation and the experience. If you promise the world, it's difficult that the customer experience is then even more and they have a good feeling, because the difference between experience and then the expectations which were formed beforehand, this gap decides if they are happy or not, if they're satisfied or not. The experience should always be better than the expectations. You should form the expectations and sell, but you should never oversell. Now, how to capture those leads was described by Alex Hormozi, and it's basically warm, where the leads know you, versus cold, that the leads don't know you, and one-to-one versus one-to-many. Warm and one-to-one, which is, for example, warm outreach and personal selling, where they actually know you. You got the consent, they maybe have seen something from you, and you call them and tell them, hey, what's up? I know you. Warm one-to-many means to post free content, something like I'm doing right now. I'm doing something alone, and a lot of people are watching it, and I built a connection. Now, the cold and one-to-one is kind of tricky, because be careful, sometimes it is actually illegal to make a cold outreach because it's seen as scammy. So be careful, depending on your region, to do it and to check it out. Now, a classical cold approach is to just call a random number and say, okay, I got something for you, and sell it there. The cold one-to-many is the classical advertisement, where you just pay for ads for people who don't know you. Now, in the marketing funnel as well, you have the stages similar and the same like in the sales funnel. And to avoid them getting stuck, you should, surprise, surprise, make it as easy for them to get to the next stage, to make it slippery again, so the customer always knows what to do. Because you have the ABCs of the sales cycle, which are the accelerators, the brakes, and the clutch. Because the accelerators are for the customers to make the step to the next stage, a free trial, for example. However, the brake is engaged if the customer doesn't know what to do, because there was a lack of positioning, a lack of understanding, and you should actively listen to feel when the brake is engaged. Now, the clutch is engaged when the clients don't know what to do next. So you should always try to build momentum, tell them the next step, and make it as easy for them to get going. Because you need to understand that the gains and the pains are always there. Gains being a revenue increase, or pains being that the engagement is simply lacking and the deployment is tough. And the inertia, this stop, this clutch, needs to be overcome with trust, with having little switching costs and with understanding that if the alternatives are good enough, then they're simply good enough. Give them a reason to change. Now, if you actually sell a lot, and that's what I hope for everybody, you will have more work sooner or later. And that means you would need to grow the team. Growing the team is something super interesting because you're actually capturing value and requires you to grow. Growing is possible by solving problems, so you get better, or by getting bigger by following new opportunities. Now, at the beginning, you will always be a generalist as an entrepreneur because you will have to do everything: the sales, the marketing, the operational, the products, whatever. You're alone. But after some times, when you hire the right person at the right time, everybody will specialize on certain factors and you will become a specialist as well. But from the get-go, it is very important that you hire the right people. It is so important to understand that you are what you hire. And every hire should increase the level of the team and set a better bar for everybody. Because there's the saying, A's hire A's, B's hire C's, and C's cost you your company. So details matter. A fit is required. And to find a fit, you should check out if it's an effective person. So if the experience, knowledge, and skills are available, and the intelligence. And luckily, that is most often just seen on the CV. Now, you should also find out if the effective person is effective within your team and within your company, because it doesn't help if it's an effective person but cannot work in your team or company. And an effective person within a team has a high emotional quotient. That means they understand what other people need and they might even flex their needs so the other person is better. They are dynamic. And to understand if the person actually fits into your company, you would have to have a cultural fit. That means that they have an alignment with the values of your company and maybe even the goals. Now, to find out if they're aligned or not, it is always good if you manage to find some passions, what they like, and other things that are similar to the company. Because if the personal goals align with the goals of the company, you will have a positive feedback loop. And that means that if they are engaged and they do something well and they get rewarded, they like it and they will continue on doing something good. So you have a positive feedback loop. In the hiring process, you should also aim at identifying if they have the 5 A's. But hiring, and the 5 A's are defined as aptitude, attitudes, awareness, authenticity, and being an athlete. Now, aptitude means if they can learn quickly, and that is important because you don't want to be somebody that learns slow and forgets quick. It should be the other way around. You should be having the problem-solving attitude to jump in and do it, and you should be persistent in doing so and try to participate together. And the attitude is sometimes very important to understand, that you have to learn that, and it can be learned as well. To be a good leader means to be a good follower. So you should also be aware of the other people around you, of your team. And you should always be yourself. You should be authentic. Last but not least, you should also, if you have all of those, be kind of an athlete who's performing on a high level. At the end of the day, you should hire for will and not for skill, because you can always train skill. Train will is nearly impossible. You should aim at people who break down the silos, who work together and solve a problem, who jump in and do it. Now, if you have somebody that has all of this, it is a high probability that they have the unique skill, which is very valuable, that they make other people successful. And if you have that, don't be cheap. The returns on intelligence on good talent is massive. And if they raise the bar, it's really, really good if you get them on your team. And to find out if all of those things are actually true, you can look for real references, not just references that they put in their CV, but if you check out where they go on and call this place, that you ask the person one crucial question, which is, with that person missing, what skill are you lacking? If you now call this real reference and they say there's nothing missing, then you can ask yourself, what will they bring to you? Now, you should always be patient and hire the right person and not the person right now. Because if you are not patient and hire the right person, sooner or later you will have a misfit. And a misfit is a lose-lose for both parties. A misfit oftentimes ends in parting the ways. And it's not pleasant, and in big companies it's very impersonal, so that is never the desired output. It should always be the last resort to fire somebody, and beforehand you should have tough conversations to talk about the issues at hand. Do not make it an ego issue. Bring somebody in and talk about it. And if they do not improve, you could actually make the tactic of bringing some expert in that you actually tell the person, I'm bringing somebody in who I'm paying $100,000 a year, and you can learn of them, so focus on this. And this actually is a win-win because it doesn't sound like a demotion. They can stay there and they can also improve themselves. So you can redefine the role, you can mentor them and improve them. And if that doesn't work, sometimes this is a reason because they were promoted into incompetency. This often happens in big firms, that somebody is doing something good, they get promoted, they do something good again, and then they suck because they have no clue. And then they just stay there and it's terrible for everybody. If you have somebody that is generally good, you should try everything to keep them in your company. But if you have somebody that falls into the 7 or 8 rule, then there's something you can do. And the 7 or 8 rule was described by Simon Squibb. He is talking about the people who are simply almost good enough. It's not the 9 or 10s which are perfect, where the company knows it's doing well and they are doing well. And it's not the 0 to 5s which are bad and everybody knows that this relationship is parting ways sooner or later. The 7 or 8s are the people you like, that they like you back, but that are simply not good enough. And you should try to find a fit. Maybe they have a different role in your company that they can do better, a different thing that they can do. But sooner or later, if there's no fit, it is a lose-lose for both. And that's very crucial to understand. And then after really you tried everything, it is better for both parties to look for a better fit outside the organization, because you need trust in your team. You need trust that everything works out. And if you hear from some troublemakers or 7 or 8s too often, then allow them to find a fit somewhere else. It shouldn't be negative. It should be a win-win. At the end of the day, they should have a work that they like, where they actually have a way to be engaged and to have a positive feedback, that there is a fit. And you should also have a good fit within your company. So make it a win-win and show them a better future ahead. Now, trust is very important for a leader, because one of the key things a leader can do is to delegate. And delegating is so important because a good leader and a good CEO wants to do as little as possible. They give the right tasks to the best people and let them do it. This is beneficial for the people because they have ownership and they can do something which fulfills them. And you as a leader trust in your team and you do what you do best. Because you are setting a standard of what is acceptable. And I even conducted a bachelor thesis about this and found out about leadership and what is most important about it. But what I can say is treat them as humans. They have a life too. Care for them and understand that this work is not everything that they have. Your position makes you a manager and your team makes you a leader, but you should actually really care for them. They are your employees. Treat them well and try to align the personal goals with the goals of the company and vice versa to get the best return from the talent. And we will talk in a different video about leadership, but really, treat them as humans. It's so simple, but it's oftentimes forgotten. If you have a huge problem in life or in business, one thing you can always do is to look for a mentor. A mentor helps you grow and you should always find ones who can accompany you. But you should always have 3 key skills when you look for a mentor. And those 3 key skills are that you can ask good questions, that you make sure to understand what the mentor said and that you filter advice. Now let's talk about this. You should always, when you ask questions, try to answer them before you ask them, because there's nothing more frustrating than getting an easy question. It's like, how do I solve X? Like, did you even try to look it up online? There was somebody before you. But the moment, and that's where the mentor is very valuable, the moment you try to find an answer and don't find it, then put this into the context. Tell the mentor what you did already, give context, say what you tried and where you have the issue. When they then give you an answer or answer with a question, make sure you understand, and you can do that by rephrasing to get a confirmation. Now, at the end of the day, you should take the advice mindfully. Don't take it blindly. Respect the advice, but be careful if it actually applies to your current situation. Now, a mentor's task is not only to give you an answer, but to inspire you to find a solution for your problem. So you can get as many as you want with different skill sets, because the goal is for you to improve. So anybody can be a mentor, and really do the 3 skills and help other people grow as well, because you can do that too. Now, the final part of this video is going to be about funding if you actually need it. So thanks for sticking around so long. And if you have any questions until now, feel free to ask them down below. In funding, my personal opinion is that the best money is the customer's money. So you would always want to have a problem so well defined that the customer wants to give you money, that the customer is successful and happy. I do think that because right now, in my personal opinion, I think the days of the cheap money throwing out in funding rounds is over, and seed money is a little bit tougher to acquire. Seed refers to one of those stages in the funding process. Because at the beginning, you can always decide between where you get your money, because you will be most of the times alone or with a small team, and you can either decide on pitch or to sell. When you sell first, the massive benefit, which I would always recommend, is that you're actually in the market and you provide less risk for the investor, because the investor sees that there is demand that you're capturing. Even better if you're profitable. That is really, really strong. If you just need the money to scale, you would be profitable and you would be surviving. But if you just need the money to make the 10x, then every investor would be more interested in sitting down and investing money. Now, there's one drawback if you sell first and then pitch afterwards, and that is that you have revenue. And now you might ask yourself, how is that a drawback? The issue is, if you actually go into funding rounds and different seed phases, is that if you have no revenue in a new market with new target groups, is that the investors have no comparison. The only thing that they can believe regarding valuation is what you tell them, the potential. It can be rainbows or whatever, and they have to believe you. But in the moment that you have actually revenue and something to compare, then they have something to go back to and say, I don't believe you, this is the number that I'm aiming for. In every investment, there are different things to go for. You could go for money, you could go for skills that the investors bring, or knowledge, or sometimes even a strategic partnership that they invest into the company. But always remember that if they invest money, you will always invest your life, okay? So the money is not as big as a deal to the investor as your life should be to you. You only have one. And also be careful when you think ahead about the funding, because in each of those stages, when you get funding and you aim at getting funding another time, you will need to provide a reason and an increase of value over this period. So if you get stuck, for example, that you get funding once and then you grow a little bit, but not enough to qualify for the next round, you will be stuck. Maybe have to go into the market when you don't want to, and this is not good. So plan ahead and make sure to calculate and to find value creating opportunities during those seed phases. For example, going into a new market, launching a new product, having a different increase in revenue, what so forth, what so on. Also be very careful when a big investor who's maybe a little bit too big comes to you. Always think in this situation, what's in it for me? Are the intentions aligned, or is it just the big investor coming to you to buying you and then burying you because they want to buy your technology? If it isn't aligned, don't take the investment and find somebody with a better fit. Now, somebody who's always interested in investing into a high-value startup are venture capitalists or VCs. But they have a lot of demand, so to get into them, it is always good to triangulate, to find somebody else, a third person, to introduce you two together so you can then make your first pitch. You should always research the venture capital firm to find out if there's actual fit. Do they go into the right industry? Do they have similar vision and mission? And when that fits in the pitch, do me the favor and don't pitch everything. They have a lot of demand. Always in a pitch, try to get to the next step and adapt the message always where you are. Don't overload them. They don't care. They want to get to know you. They want to get to know your company, and they should be very intrigued and want to make the next step. There are different strategies which were described in the Harvard iLab down below. Make sure to check them out as well. As in business and in life, timing is everything in funding. So you should always assume the unexpected, some crisis. So if a deal is on the table, get it done. Don't overestimate the adoption time and underestimate the resources, because there's nothing more embarrassing than coming to the table to the investors and telling them that you need the money sooner, because that puts the leverage on their side. Now, always aim to have an investor fit and to actually know the amount of capital you're raising. And if you know and go for a complete sell-off, to think about the option pool of your colleagues as well, of the co-founders, if they have equity in your company. And always when you're on the sell side, so when you are selling your company or a part of your company, always bring in competition. Urgency rises prices just as much as competition. If you are in the market already and you have a lot of revenue and maybe a team and are profitable, you can try to control the process to negotiate prices. Now, I found this from a private equity channel on YouTube, it's linked down below as well, that you should try to control the process, because when you negotiate for a company and you value it, the negotiation oftentimes happens on a one-to-one basis on the table. But if you manage to have a lot of competition and you can allow yourself to say, okay, listen, we have this process, I want to have this offer on the table from everybody on this time, or you're out, and then you go over these offers, then you can make the process in a way that allows you to kick out the lowest bidders and keep on with those who matter the most to you and who are the most attractive. This way, you have a process which does the negotiating for you, and nobody catches any hard feelings if you say, listen, the competition was better, you're not part of this process anymore. Now, as in life, in my opinion, fortune favors the brave. So cultivate luck by doing a lot and get out there. The personal side builds the foundation. The theory gives the correct way, but it only matters what you do. So get out there and apply what you learned. Now, to summarize what we learned, in the block 1, we went through the personal side and we're talking about the approach, that it is a journey that you should enjoy. And you can enjoy it by having a clear goal which is aligned with your values and purpose. To find the purpose and values, it's easy to inverse the things you don't like, so to find the opposite and then strive for those. Motivation is key to start, but discipline is crucial to continue. You should then focus on the task that you want to do, and focus also gives you the ability to understand what you don't need to do. Finally, in block 1, we went over the importance of money and that it is a store of value, and that you should always understand the consequences of your goals. Then in the second block, we were talking about the theory, about value, that it depends on individual needs, about supply and demand, and that you should find needs and problems of your target market. You should create a fitting solution and with a value proposition. Now, with the solutions, we had the solution neutral functions and the difficulty value matrix, which made it easy to pick the best one. We built all of this upon a vision and a mission to have a good culture which supports working together. In block 3, we talked about the minimum viable product for the minimal viable segments. We were talking about branding being the key differentiator for long-term success. In the go-to-market, we were talking about the importance of results-oriented, measured and execution, ROAM. and the importance of a legal structure. Just mention again, no legal advice. And then we were talking about how to sell, that you need to understand if there's actually an interest or a need in the other person, if the problem that you think is there, and if you like each other, that the deal will happen sooner or later. In the marketing and sales cycle, we were talking about the sales funnel. We were talking about the importance of a hire and the alignment of goals to create a positive feedback loop which sets up the company for success. We were also talking about the hiring process, that you should look for experience, knowledge and skills, IQ, emotional quotient, cultural fit, and the 5 A's. And now we know that returns on intelligence are asymmetrical. They are enormous. You should never be cheap, and you should always hire the right person at the right time, because you might create a misfit if you don't. And if you have a misfit, you should try everything to solve it. But if you cannot solve it, it is a win-win if you create a fit somewhere else. Bring someone in, redefine the role, and if not, help them find a fit somewhere else. Make it a win-win. Now, the topic of leadership and delegation was talked about briefly. We will talk about that in the future. But you now understand that it's very important to treat them as humans. Surprise, surprise! We were talking about the relevance of a mentor and having the 3 key skills, which are to ask good questions, to make sure that you understand, and to filter the advice so you don't just take it blindly but mindfully. In funding, we were talking about the customer's money being the best money, to find a fit between you and the investor, and to be careful when big firms approach you with potential bad intentions. We're also talking about creating urgency and driving up prices by bringing up competition. If you have actually a little bit more proof and a little bit more experience while being in the market, that should also bring more to the table from your side and bring you more power. Then you can make a clear process which is doing the negotiation for you. And always remember that your life is more important than money. Now, thanks for sticking around for so long. The thing is just in practice is that this approach sometimes is even a little bit unclearer. And I really want you to take away that there are guidelines to go for. There are frameworks which make life easier. And that in life, oftentimes you realize there is a problem. You find a possible solution. You test it, then you get the first sales. You scale, you hire, and then you maybe go for funding, while you build a vision, branding and marketing runs on the side. I really hope that you could take some new things away, that there was a lot of value which was new for you. And I really recommend you to check out all the information down below, which I linked and structured in a certain way. You will see it in the description. I hope you have a nice day. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section. And if you really enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like. Have a nice day and see you.